Hello everybody, and thank you for joining us on our webinar today. My name's Lucy and I'll be moderating today's webinar, The Key to Subscriber Success. Before I pass you over to our webinar presenter, there are a few housekeeping topics I'd like to cover. Firstly, today's webinar is being recorded and we'll be sending out a link to this tomorrow so that you can either revisit the content yourself or pass it on to a colleague. Secondly, we'd love you to ask some questions throughout the webinar. Please do this by using the console to the right of your screen. Myself and Sean will be monitoring the questions as they come in and we'll be putting them to Ben at the end of the webinar. Finally, we do have a poll in the webinar. We'll be really grateful if you could take part in this as it appears on the screen. We'll be discussing the results shortly after. So today's presenter is Ben Edwards, who is our SVP of Business Development. And without further ado, I will pass you across to Ben.
Thanks, Lucy. Hi, everybody. And as Lucy said, I'm Ben. I'm in charge of business development here at PageSuite, which basically means I get to travel all over and meet lots of different publishers and talk digital and mobile strategy with them, which is great. And for those of you that don't know PageSuite, we're a digital and mobile and app solutions provider. And we work with around 1,300 newspaper and magazine publishers all across the world. And I can see many of you on today's webinar are actually clients, which is great. And like Lucy said, implore you to ask any questions. So during my time meeting with clients over 2017, 2018, one thing has become clear, and that's newspapers and magazines are increasingly charging for their digital content, be that through the e-paper replica product, which is what we started back in 2008, or more innovative solutions like the live news products that we deliver, or even video and other forms of engaging content online and app solutions. So in today's webinar, we're going to be looking at what tactics can hook younger audiences and what will drive their subscriber habits. So with newspaper publishers now making more money from subscriptions than advertising, that tipping point was actually in 2016-17. This topic is becoming increasingly important. We're going to look at what models and products are successful, what is happening in other industries or in consumer brands and that can take ideas and inspiration from. There's a nod to e-commerce and how improving user journey can deliver great results. And we'll be looking at the challenges to some of these strategies. Now, PageSuite's been a long time an e-paper provider, and that's key to us. But generally speaking, that is a more older demographic and audience targeted product. The new live news products, particularly on the mobile, are seen as product for the young generation, but are less commonly paywalled. So we'll be looking at how those and other digital and app products can deliver paying and subscriber revenue streams. For instance, if you look at the Daily Mail, their iPad edition is a replica product that's paid, but their mobile is free. And the same can be said for the Sun. The final part that we're looking at is the impact of the social media giants, the digital duopoly, which is particularly relevant in the last couple of weeks. And we're looking at how Google and Facebook and other social products can help or hinder publishers. So the first slide that we're going into is a status review, where we currently are. So advertising is declining. And even though Facebook's trust is at an all-time low, there seems to be little appetite to go in harder on the Cambridge Analytica data issues or the highlighting of the Facebook fact that they even took to traditional media to build trust back up in their audience. To me, the digital duopoly is looking a little bit like Teflon. So publishers focusing on subscriptions as the bedrock of their business seems to be the way to go. When I first arrived at PageSuite in 2009, there was only a few publishers actually testing paywalls. I remember a couple of regional publishers in the UK, North America, going either the meter or hard paywall, which seemed like a matter of weeks and months. Now, it was short-lived, and that was probably because digital advertising revenues in 2010-11 was still relatively strong. A lot of publishers were chasing volume and audience, and that negatively impacted their revenue streams. That is with the exception of the Times and the FT, who were early pioneers in the hard paywall game. And you can now look back at them and say they were probably ahead of the time and are now reaping the rewards from making that jump early. Because we're still seeing across the industry a range of subscription strategies being tested and implemented. The Telegraph was a prominent one last year in the UK, moving from a metered paywall, where a certain number of articles in a given time would be free, and then the paywall would drop, and then everything after would be paid for. And they moved to premium, which is where their journalists and their editors would actually mark certain pieces of content as premium, and that would be fully locked down. We've got New York Times and the Wall Street and the Washington Post reducing the number of free to view articles over the past couple of years, almost down to a couple a month before their meter actually drops. And even Google being part of the subscription game and removing the first click free from their search results. One of the important things when looking at what's happened in the last year from talking to publishers is what they're citing as reasons people are leaving or churning from subscriptions, and key is the household spend. And for one of our Scandinavian publishers, they actually identified that their monthly subscription price was being compared by the majority of their households against Spotify and paid TV. So they're not competing against local or other national titles or magazines or content producers. It's all around other paid for products like Spotify or Sky or what have you. Now, in some markets, Africa, Middle East and India, we're still finding the majority of digital products are available for free. We do work with Nation Media in Kenya, and they've got paid for e-paper apps with us, but that seems to be the extent of their digital paid for strategy. The final piece on our status review is what's happening in the marketplace. Well, Zuora IPO'd last month, and now they are a company born out of Salesforce who preach the subscriber economy. They listed at $14 and soon jumped up to $20 on the NASDAQ, which shows that Wall Street and the financial heartlands believe that companies like this have got a long-term play and that the subscriber economy is only just starting. Our partners MPP Global are growing too, and there are some others out there in the marketplace like Piano who are doing really well, working with media companies, publishers, TV companies, all sorts. Now, what that shows to us more on the content side and the app and the digital product side is that publishers are increasingly looking at more sophisticated solutions that help manage their sign-up process, help manage payments, different currencies, impact and review churn, and also create offers and incentives. So there's 4 key areas that we're going to be looking at in this webinar that we here at PageSpeed feel publishers can identify as ways in which to drive digital subscribers. The first of which is incentives. Now, I've mentioned Telegraph a couple of times already, but when they moved from meter to premium, they also shortly after came out with a great incentive as a way to try and drive that further. And they did a partnership with Fitbit that enabled brand new annual subscribers to get one of their cool devices for free as part of that subscription. We've also got The National, which is a Scottish title from NewsQuest, born out of the Scottish referendum. Now, whiskey's the national drink of Scotland, so it's no surprise that this was a particularly popular incentive. And what they tried to do was actually drive annual subscriptions as well. So to get that nice big 12-month subscription in the bag. And they offered the whiskey contra deal provider the opportunity to get increased digital and print exposure. Now, that was a couple of years ago, but it's been so successful that they've done it every year since, and it is their most popular incentive to date. On the magazine side, we've got Archon, who don't necessarily do contras focused around trying to get, not specifically around trying to get the 12-month subscription in the bag, although it tends to be a minimum 6-month subscription offer, but they do it around special dates. So the one we're showing here is a Mother's Day special, where if you're a son or a daughter and you want to get your mum a magazine subscription to one of their plethora of titles, you can get that bonus box of Thornton's chocolates. And that obviously works for the advertising partner. It works for the publisher because it drives new subscriptions and new subscribers and all of the data. And it works for the consumer because they get a little bit something extra in there. One over in America that caught our eye last month was the New York Times, which had a great deal, which was $5 a month, all in digital access, which already is a pretty competitive rate when we look at across the industry. And they also offered a complimentary Spotify premium offer, which was on its own $10 a month. So you can see the economics would work for trying to drive new and incentivize new subscribers. The final one that we've found and we're working with a couple of publishers on is moving off annual subscriptions from iTunes or Google Play Store. Now, that could be a particularly chunky sum of money, maybe $100 odd, $200 odd, depending on your price point, but you also most likely don't get a ton of that data, and obviously the net revenue perspective is important too. So by trying to move those off of iTunes or Google Play onto your own membership database enables you to get that. Plus, it gives the reader an incentive to get more targeted content. If they've got the data and they can use it on your website or in your apps, they get access to more products through their subscriptions. There's benefits all around. So tempting readers. So this slide's all around what publishers are doing to actually get people into the pipeline at the top of the funnel, if you will. So we're seeing that publishers who do have meters are offering an increasingly small amount of content for free. So back when everybody put all their content online for free and created that perception that it should all be free, we gave away too much. I think that's fairly obvious for everyone right now. But what we're doing is trying to give just enough to tease the reader without giving too much away. And that's exemplified by a number of metered sites across the world. One pricing report from a subscription solution provider last year showed that across the world, the average subscription price for a newspaper, a daily paper or newspaper, was $20 a month. Now, that's obviously the full price without any incentives or discounts taken into account. But that's a useful benchmark for a lot of publishers to see, well, where they're at, and give them a starting point if they haven't yet made that move. One interesting thing we're finding from a lot of our meetings and calls with publishers and clients is that a few of those, particularly in Scandinavia and in America, if I'm honest, more so than mainland Europe or other parts of the world, is that publishers are looking at wholly paid for products. So they've already got people into the way of paying something for content, but now they feel there's enough out there, there's enough people willing to pay more, pay that premium for a product that has no advertising in. So I think that's something that might develop over the course of the year. I know we've got a couple of clients looking to launch brand new products in that vein. Now, obviously, with the perception and online and with digital products for the majority of people that it should all be free, that's a difficult barrier to overcome. So one way of overcoming that barrier is enabling them still to get content for free by nature of a free trial, or at least a very low entry point, so $1 a month or €1 a month, just to get them in. And as we find out later in the presentation, that enables you to get a couple of key pieces in the subscriber puzzle. Now, the Times have a really interesting 3-step process with a goal of attaining 90% retention for their subscribers. This was at a One-Iffer event I went to, where one of their circulation people guided the rest of the audience through the process that they go through. The first stage of that 3-step process is to get readers to consume 10 online articles, ideally in month 1. That's the first tick in the box. The second one is, can you get that subscriber to download an app? They've got a great mobile product. They also have the tablet editions as well, and on Kindle Fire and Android. So that's step 2. And then the final step to try and attain that 90% retention rate for the Times is to get them to attend one of their events. Now, I've also seen The Guardian do this. I know a number of titles in other parts of the world will invite premium subscribers into their offices, maybe when a journalist is doing a specific interview or they're doing a round table. And it's a great way to get the audience fully engaged in that community aspect, that membership type model that publishers are tending to appeal to nowadays. The final piece in the tempting readers equation is tempting them to stay. So with print circulation dropping, there is a percentage of people who will be leaving your brand in a paid for manner. So why not get them to pay something for digital if they're leaving print? Get your marketing and circulation teams calling them up, engaging with the reader to say, look, there's still an e-paper product available to you. There's a mobile product available to you. If price is important and that's the reason you're leaving, it's at a lower rate. And then you've got them still engaged with your brand, still paying something, so that further down the line, perhaps for them or for their family, they will come back and pay more and be part of that. So the third piece of our 4-part evaluation is optimizing the user journey. And to me, this really means reducing the barriers to entry. And the masters of this are Apple. In the way that they get people to pay for things. They're continuously refining the user journey. Right when they invented iTunes and the App Store, they began that process of the one-click payments, which then has been successfully adopted by Amazon in the e-commerce world, and even with eBay spinning off PayPal as a reflection of how something as simple as a payment can be refined to something that's incredibly important. It was a one-click payment. It was linked to the iTunes account, which had all your billing information on it. It had really clever billing mechanisms too. And now they're innovating further. They've got fingerprint payments for biometric. They've got facial recognition enabling you to pay for things. Now, to many publishers, this seems extreme, and it may well be extreme, but it just goes to prove how seriously the payment process needs to be taken. Very recently, we've seen Google Subscribe be introduced, and that's promising to make it easier for publishers to pay. In fact, there's a couple of people on this webinar who are launch partners for this, but from the pieces we understand, this is part of Google's wider relationship building with local publishers, trying to keep them engaged. Facebook tried to do the same with instant articles. Now, I haven't heard much success around this venture. A lot of the media companies we speak to are still on Facebook, but more for brand and marketing awareness. So the Build, Boston Globe, Washington Post were alpha partners, but I'm sure I read a report somewhere that says something like 40% of those alphas in 2016 never actually created a single instant article. So to me, the jury's still out. I'd be interested to get feedback as to whether anybody is seeing significant subscriber value from Facebook instant articles. One thing publishers do have a ton of control over is the data that they collect and house themselves. New York Times presented at INMA in last year, and they identified 40 data points which impacted the reader's propensity to pay. Now, their CMO delivered that and obviously had everyone hooked, because we were thinking, well, what are these data points? And then she said there's 5 key ones, and that got people even more engaged. But unfortunately, she didn't reveal what those 5 key data points were. Fortunately, we've got publishers who are willing to share a bit of intelligence with us, and we try and glean what we can. And we've come up with what we feel are the 5 based on our evidence and what clients are telling us. And the first one is the operating system. So we find that if people are on an Apple operating system as opposed to an Android or any other operating system, they have a much higher propensity to pay. The second most important data point we feel is the device. So we find that generally speaking, people who have an iPad have got a higher propensity to pay than any other device, even the iPhone, Android smartphone, Android tablet, even a laptop, smart TV, all of the other devices out there. iPad seems to reign supreme. The third and fourth key data points are quite well interlinked. The first of which is the login profile creation. So if you've got some sort of profile on a website or within an app, and then you go further with the fourth data point, which is have you got your payment information stored? Those two combined are really important in getting people to continue paying, or for you to actually get resubscriptions. Now, the fifth data point that was being collected that we felt was highly impactful was disposable income. If you look at those publishers with the greatest digital success, the Financial Times, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, they're based in financial heartlands, or at least cities with people with higher disposable income. So this must play into that part. It also maybe explains why Africa or in India or other less developed economies where disposable incomes are less, there's still a propensity to give away digital content for free. The final point on the user and the optimized user journey is the optimizing design for those devices. So it wasn't so long ago, newspapers only had to design for one device, the print newspaper, and then there was the desktop, and now there's the tablet and the phone, smart TVs, smart watches, Alexa, Google Home. It's very difficult for publishers to optimize their user journey and design for all those devices, but optimize you should. And a case that I use is Le Figaro, who is a French daily paper, and I think they've got an absolutely brilliant user journey, trying to drive paid for subscriptions. They've got a high visibility premium product across all of their channels. They've got a really quick and easy form to fill out, which is obviously quite light touch in the data that they select and need. They have a simple product choice, and they have a low entry price of €1. So it gets people in, it gets people accessing content, and then they're able to upsell or get resubscriptions further down the line. The final piece or idea that we have for publishers to try and drive subscriptions, for me, is the most important thing, and it's about the content that you're creating. It's what you do. It's what your journalists and your editorial teams are all about, and complementing that is the marketeers and the circulation people that you have, and how you actually offer out those subscriptions. VG, one of Scandinavia's biggest paid-for daily brands in Norway, identified that key to driving new digital subscriptions for them was hyperlocal sports coverage. So nobody else in their market was doing downhill skiing and regional football as well as they could. So their journalists went armed with cameras and notepads, and they did written reports, they did audio, they did video content, and it got people paying. So for them, it was all about going back to the journalists and finding out what truly engaged readers. What could they cover that was unique and valuable? Other examples would be the New European, which is a post-Brexit newspaper created a couple of years ago by one of our clients. It's a weekly paid-for title. They've just upped their cover price again, still going strong. Similarly, you had the National, which we showed earlier, born out of the Scottish referendum, making products, brand new ideas out of something that empowered and was passionate within an audience, and captured that and got them to pay for it. I was listening to the radio the other day, and the director of a big football program producer was saying what would be a great idea is if all of the football teams in the country created one program for every weekend. I was like, well, that's a newspaper, and that's what Marca do in Spain. You've got Washington Post, who are positioning themselves as the global brand for really driving home political reporting. You've got the Times, because of their ownership under News UK and the relationship they therefore have with Sky TV and Talk Sport, it makes sense that they drive sports, and that is what they are always pushing when it comes to trying to drive new digital subscriptions. They bought the licensing rights for some of the highlights for the cricket and the rugby and the football. They hire top journalists and other sports reporters such as Henry Winter. The FT is another great example with their focus on business. They've got a very clear strategy, and their content is aligned with that, and they're able to charge. So what can you offer? What can't they get for free elsewhere? One really impactful content and messaging proposition we've seen this year was from the Chicago Sun-Times, who published a print copy which had a completely blank-free front page, as if to say to the readers and the local business community, this is what would happen if there is no Chicago Sun-Times. There will be nobody investigating politicians. There's nobody delving into local affairs. There's nobody covering the great sports team of that market. And they followed it up with a digital piece written by the editor saying for 27 cents, you can get the complimentary access. Now, I don't know how successful that was, but from the outside looking in, that was an impactful way of getting that message across. Also on the messaging front, a lot of publishers just go for the straight benefits targeting. Guardian goes slightly differently, where they actually suggest a polite request for a subscription, and they link it to their program of open journalism and the fact they're funded by the Scottish Trust and they want everything to be free and open. And that's similar to how Wikipedia appeal to their funding as well. Now, that must be quite reflective of the liberal stance, and to me, that shows that tonality is increasingly important in how you try and persuade people to go for those subscriptions. So I've covered a couple of slides in the first part of the webinar, and now we've actually got our poll, which is all around those 4 points. Correct, Sean?
That is correct. Thanks, Ben. So we've now come to today's poll. Please take 60 seconds to make your selection, and we'll share the results.
So this is a question on what would you prioritise potentially in the next year out of the 4 topics that we're suggesting to try and drive digital subscriptions. Are incentives important? Are the ways that you tempt readers, either through pricing or through free trials, important? Is optimizing the user journey going to be important to you? Or indeed is the heart of it in the content that you produce and the marketing and messaging that your circulation teams follow up? So we're getting some early results indicating that, what's in the lead, Sean?
So content and messaging looking like it's in the lead. Let me just close that now and share the results. So yeah, it's clear content and messaging. It's obviously taking the lead there, Ben. What do you think of that?
Yeah, that's interesting, and it isn't surprising. I think for national brands or for regional brands with a strong geographic presence, you're able to capture the hearts and minds of your readers, and it's great to see. I think second place was incentives, so people using contra deals or some sort of offers to try and drive subscriptions is a really interesting angle as well. I'm sure we'll be producing some blog posts as a follow-up.
Of course.
Of course, yes. So thank you very much for doing that poll. The importance for that for PageSuite is we just get some really useful feedback from you, and helps guide us a little bit in terms of what we're going to be doing. So thank you for your contribution there. So back to the presentation. So an important part of digital subscriptions is looking at what else is out there, and has Netflix the result, or has that driven the change of consumer preferences? They certainly, for me, were the first ones out of the block in terms of driving a subscriber type experience where you pay one fee, you get access to everything, and it's very choice centric. And fortunately for PageSpeed, we've been exposed to one fantastic product that's relatively comparable. We've done a rather large container app project for Egmont out of Scandinavia, who've got a branded product called Flip in Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and Finland. And what it does, it combines all of the content from their whole magazine portfolio under one roof, under one brand, Flip, and people pay a single monthly fee to get access to that Flip product. Now, they've launched that with the B2C market and got really good uptake. But the clever thing they've done, which not many publishers have done, is also offer that and license it to B2B brands. So energy companies or travel companies that are looking at ways to drive their own value from their offering, that they can white label this and drive subscriptions that way, which has been a great success. The other nice thing about that product is that it gives people the preferences and the control and the deep personalization like you get with Netflix, where you can favorite and select an offline content. And outside of us and PageSpeed, you've got other people doing very similar things. So there was Zinio, there was Magster, and outside of that, in e-commerce, we've also got businesses adopting a Netflix model or a subscriber economy model and doing very well through that. Gusto is a direct-to-door food meal planning subscription service, which I understand has got significant backing and funding. I'm sure there's similar brands in your local markets, but that's our UK one. Bottom right, you've got Graze, which launched as a subscription to snacks, where you get your favourite snacks delivered straight through your letterbox. It's become so popular that they're even now in retail stores. And I guess the old lady of subscriptions was Sky Sports, and even today they're in the news again. They've lost their rights to the Spanish football to another provider, but it just goes to show that market is still going strong, and that paying for premium content is something that people are always willing to bid for, including BT with the Champions League. And then on the music scene, you've got Spotify, the innovators. Jay-Z got involved with one, which I've forgotten, and Tidal, thank you, Sean, and Apple Music, all vying for the prize of being the top music game subscription service. So there's plenty out there in the marketplace to take inspiration from model-wise, as well as we look at it and go, well, what are they doing design-wise? What are they doing feature and functionality-wise? What is it that we can glean and learn from outside of the publishing and media market that we can bring into our solutions and our models? So the final part of our presentation today is specifically around the millennials and paying for the content. Obviously, we've touched on a number of millennial related pieces, such as the fact that maybe they were born in the time where the perception of the internet was free, and that you've got to overcome that challenge to get them starting to pay for something. There's also the fact that millennials are highly tied in with social media, and we've sort of analysed that. Has instant articles on that platform made a difference? Will the Google new product make a difference? That's still to be determined, but certainly there are ways in which publishers have successfully encouraged younger subscribers to start paying for content. For example, the Telegraph say their fastest growing segment is actually the 18 to 34 market. And I understand they've been using channels like Snapchat and Facebook and Twitter to reach out to those potential readers, talking in the same tone and driving brand recognition through social. I mean, young people are obviously interested in news, and the Trump bump was another example of where a traditional newspaper publisher was able to engage with a younger demographic and get them to start paying for digital content. The geographic side is also important in markets where they have a higher disposable income available to them. You look at the FT and the innovation they made by offering free access to children and university students with a view to winning the long-term subscriber, which is a really early sort of idea to get them to buying into the FT brand with the future hope that they will subscribe further down the line when they have more money. And gifting, I know, is a part of that for the Financial Times and for other newspaper publishers, getting maybe more wealthy backers, businesses to contribute so that the younger people who don't necessarily have that disposable income can pay. Okay, great. So that is the end of the main part of the webinar. We're now moving on to our conclusions. So the real point is there obviously is no one size fits all, because we've already identified, even from a geographic perspective, an African publisher cannot do the same as a European publisher. You've also got the differing impacts within local markets. But the questions that you can ask yourself and the examples that you can take will be summarised as such. You know, what are you producing? What is the content that your journalists are creating? Have you got something unique that isn't available for free? And if you haven't, what can you do about that? How can you sell it? You know, how can you package it up and create an interesting value proposition? I've already mentioned that publishers are starting to look at wholly paid for products without any advertising. Is that the way that is important to you? Are you going to start reducing the number of print editions that you produce every week, and perhaps you can have print only on weekend, digital during the week? What's your pricing strategy? Obviously that will compare to local competitors, but as we've seen from our Finnish client example, you're also up against, on a household budgetary side, other subscriber services. So are you delivering better value for money than a Spotify or a Sky Sports that is a similar monthly fee? And if you're not, well, what can you do about that? And finally, are you offering any benefits or offers or incentives to get people engaged and incentivized in the first place, get them into the funnel? And if you're interested in actually talking to us about improving your subscriber journey, answering some of these products on pricing, on product, we're always happy to help, have an open discussion. It's obviously what we do on a daily basis.
Thanks very much, Ben. That was really interesting and insightful webinar, some great examples, and I know obviously a lot of it is very topical right now. We've had some questions come in throughout that webinar, so we're going to go over to Sean now, who's going to put those to Ben. But if you do have anything else that you want us to discuss right now or bring up, then please feel free to answer your question now, and we will try and answer as many of them as possible. Any that we don't, we'll make sure that we follow up with after. But yeah, thanks once again for joining us today.
Okay, thanks, Lucy. So the first question we've had in is a lot of the examples you showed are big national, international brands. Can these models work for smaller brands?
Yeah, so the VG example, which was although it's a national brand in Norway, the regional content they were serving up was important. I'm surprised when I pick up regional papers that there's less local sports coverage, because that's what I was really engaged with. And the news and coverage that is relevant to the local communities needs to be seen more in a lot of the regional publications that I certainly pick up here in the UK. As answered by the poll, the content side of things is absolutely critical. So ensuring that the journalists and the editorial teams have got the creative opportunity and the license and the manpower to create such content is going to be really important to drive digital subscriptions for those regional and niche brands.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, second question. How big an impact do you think Google Subscribe will have?
Obviously, that's been the most recent announcement in the digital subscription space. It certainly is interesting. I know there's a number of brands who are going live with that. It's difficult to tell, but I know from the funding that Google are putting behind it, it seems to be more of a concerted effort maybe than Facebook or for others. So I'm hopeful for those publishers who are part of that initial scheme that it works well. I think Google have done well by removing the first click free, and this is yet another mark where they seem to be trying to work with publishers.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out over the coming months.
So this question just come in here. How do you determine a strategy in a market that has no competitors and a market where users are reluctant to pay for online and any sort of payment for media?
So I guess, how do you develop those payment habits and test different strategies there?
Yeah, well, I mean, the one great benefit that seems to be instantly relevant there is the lack of competition, which is a great starting point. Although I guess you mean traditional media competition, because there doesn't need to be any market that has escaped Google and Facebook as a competitor. Now, how you would actually engage with that reader who isn't used to paying is understand what are the barriers to them paying. Is it that they don't have disposable income? There's a perception that content should be free, and tackling those issues head on. It really would depend on your specific market. But we'd happily do some investigative work with you on that, because, like I said, Kenya is very different to America, which is very different to Norway. And until you get into the weeds on that individual market, it'd be wrong for me to make a broad sweeping statement.
Okay, so next question. Do you see other media formats like AR and VR being viable ways to incentivize readers to engage with existing content?
I do, yes.
Interesting.
Yeah, I do, definitely. I think both could be important. I mean, AR has been around for a number of years in the form of there's a product in the UK called Blipper that newspapers and magazines tried to integrate with. But as that has progressed, you can see that the actual mechanisms and the creative output from that is always improving. Virtual reality is something really, really interesting as a way to engage paid for audiences. The types of content that newspapers and magazines cover, so if you take sport or business or culture or arts or entertainment, it lends itself very well to that experiential, that moment. And if you can give your readers a piece of that action through virtual reality by sitting in their home or in their office, then they can be part of that. I saw The Guardian did a piece with virtual reality around war zones. I'm sure it won't be long before one of our publishers tries to work with us on some sort of sports related content in stage in VR from your home. I can see a lot of opportunities for it, and with both Android and Apple devices being able to support it and different headsets coming out, I think the future's bright.
Okay, thanks, Ben. I think we have time for a couple more.
Yeah.
So there's one here. Read the Financial Times. Do you have any info on what % is business paid and what % by individuals?
Yeah, I mean,
I don't think that those.
I don't have those, but it is. I guess you're alluding to that point where I made about the demographic and the available, the average earnings of these people. You're right in sort of saying, well, it's easier for people to pay for a subscription if they're able to expense it, for sure. But even if they're not, you're still competing in the household budget scenario. And if you can put a value on your content and it is up against something else that people are spending, people will make that decision. But no, we don't have any direct information on that, although I wish we did.
Definitely. So yeah, final question here. How relevant is the e-paper in the subscription economy?
Yeah, my favourite topic, because ever since I started, the e-paper has been the next thing to die. Every year I get told by digital experts and highfalutin innovators that the e-paper is rubbish, it doesn't mean anything. Yet for a ton of our clients, and even some of the big ones, it is still one of the most profitable products, and it is still key to their board of directors, and their CEO still absolutely loves it. And if I just look at our traffic has gone up around 40% in the last year. And although we've won new business from competitors, that isn't wholly as a result of that. That's a result of publishers getting it right, getting people to engage with digital editions, getting people to engage with apps, and making it part of the subscriber benefits. I think there is innovations to be made with the e-paper. Publishers like Newsday, for example, have done great things by adding rich media content, image galleries, really driving engagement. We're working on a product that's going to be the next level of e-paper, where you take content out of a PDF or out of a CMS and you create a wholly optimized mobile or tablet edition. So there's definitely innovations being made, but that compartmentalised front, middle and end thing that people associate with paying for with the news or a magazine, it has a starting point. The editor has made a decision. It's not just an endless stream of consciousness as Twitter is or Facebook is. There is something where you start and you finish it. I think it's important and people are willing to pay for that.
Okay. Yeah, so I think we had some great questions coming in there. So thanks very much for sending those over. Thanks once again also for watching the webinar. We hope you did find it informative. If you had any feedback on that as well, we'd also welcome your feedback. You can either email Ben directly, his details are on the screen right now, or you can email hello@pagetreat.com and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. As I said at the beginning of the webinar, we will be sending that link over to you tomorrow so that you can share it, and we'll be sending out details of our next webinar shortly, and we hope you can join us again there. So thanks very much for joining us, and we hope you have a good day.
Thank you.